Television was in its infancy. Well, I thought it was just another job, so I took it. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine what would happen to us.
Competition was always there. Adding fuel to the fire was the press. Magazines and newspapers constantly praised Lucy as the comedic genius, while relegating Vivian to the role of sidekick. While Vivian appreciated the recognition, she also longed for more acknowledgement of her contributions. Without Ethel, Lucy's antics wouldn't have worked nearly as well. Vivian provided the grounding force, the straight woman who gave Lucy's wildness contrast and context. But in Hollywood, supporting players rarely got their due. The dynamic with William Frawley only worsened the atmosphere. While the audience loved Fred and Ethel's bickering, the truth was that Vivian could barely stand him. He made constant jokes about her weight, mocked her behind her back, and was often difficult to work with due to his drinking. Vivian later admitted that working with Frawley was one of the hardest parts of the show. She disliked being paired with him and resented that the world now saw her as his on-screen wife. Despite all this, there were moments of real affection between Lucy and Vivian. Over time, they developed a complicated bond. Lucy knew she couldn't have done the show without Vivian, and in later years she expressed deep gratitude for her co-star. For Vivian, the relationship was bittersweet. She both loved and resented Lucy, admired her brilliance, but never forgot the sacrifices she had been forced to make in order to play Ethel. By the end of the I Love Lucy run, Vivian was exhausted. The fame had come, but at a cost she hadn't expected, and before her death, she would reveal the full truth about what that cost truly was, and it shocked fans who thought they knew the whole story. As the cameras stopped rolling and I Love Lucy became part of television history, Vivian Vance faced the challenge of life after Ethel Mertz. For many actors, being part of such an iconic series was a blessing, but for Vivian it was also a curse. She struggled to break free from the shadow of Ethel, a character that millions adored, but one she privately resented. Casting directors rarely saw her as anything but Lucy's frumpy neighbor, making it nearly impossible for her to reinvent herself. Still, Vivian pressed forward. She appeared in theater productions, made guest appearances on television, and even reunited with Lucille Ball in later projects like The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy. By then, her relationship with Lucy had softened. Though their time on I Love Lucy had been complicated, they had grown to respect and even care for each other deeply. Lucy would later describe Vivian as irreplaceable, confessing that no one could have played Ethel the way she did. But behind the curtain, Vivian's personal life was filled with hardship. She went through multiple marriages, endured battles with depression, and in her later years faced devastating health struggles. In 1973, Vivian was diagnosed with breast cancer. Though she fought valiantly, the disease returned, and by the late 1970s, her health began to decline rapidly. Knowing her time was limited, Vivian became more candid about her experiences, particularly her years on I Love Lucy. In private conversations with friends, and later in interviews, Vivian admitted the truth. As much as she loved the laughter, the fame, and the connection with audiences, her time on I Love Lucy had also been one of the most painful chapters of her life. She revealed how humiliating it had been to be cast as frumpy Ethel when in reality she was a glamorous woman in her 40s. She spoke openly about the cruel comments from William Frawley, the industry's obsession with appearance, and the pressure from Lucille Ball to remain in the background. Perhaps most shocking of all, Vivian confessed that she had sometimes hated the role that made her famous. While the public adored Ethel, Vivian often felt trapped by her. She believed the show robbed her of opportunities to showcase her full range as an actress. Ethel was good for the world, she reportedly told a friend, but she was hard on me. And yet there was a bittersweet duality in her final reflections. Vivian acknowledged that despite all the pain, I Love Lucy had also given her a legacy that would outlive her. The character she once resented became the reason she would never be forgotten. By the time of her death in 1979, Vivian had come to terms with her complicated past. Lucille Ball was among the last people to see her. According to those close to them, Lucy wept openly at Vivian's bedside, telling her how much she loved her and how important she had been to the show and to her life. For all the rivalry, the jealousy, and the tension, theirs had become a bond forged in history. Two women who together changed the face of television forever. But Vivian's final truth remains haunting. Behind the laughter of I Love Lucy was a woman who carried scars from an industry that typecast her, a co-star who belittled her, and a role that demanded she sacrifice her own identity. The world will always remember Ethel Mertz with fondness, but the woman who played her left behind a warning. Sometimes, the price of making people laugh is much higher than anyone ever realizes. For millions of television viewers in the 1950s, I Love Lucy was more than just a sitcom. It was a cultural phenomenon. Families gathered around black and white screens to laugh at Lucy Ricardo's hilarious antics. Desi Arnaz's musical charm and the perfect comedic foil provided by Fred and Ethel Mertz. But behind the laughter, the bright studio lights and the canned applause was a world very different from the one America saw on screen. And at the center of that world was Vivian Vance, the actress who gave life to Lucy's best friend, Ethel. For decades, audiences adored the chemistry between Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance. They looked like inseparable partners in crime, neighbors who shared secrets and laughter. Yet before her death, Vivian revealed a shocking truth about her time on the show, one that shattered the carefully crafted illusion. What she endured off-camera and the reality of her relationship with Lucille Ball and others was far from the warm friendship portrayed on screen. Vivian's story isn't just about backstage drama. It's about the sacrifices women in Hollywood had to make, the battles fought in silence, and the cost of making people laugh in an industry that often wasn't kind. As the years passed and her health declined, Vivian finally spoke out, revealing the side of I Love Lucy that fans were never meant to see. And once you hear her truth, you'll never look at America's favorite sitcom the same way again. Before she became a household name as Ethel Mertz, Vivian Vance was a seasoned actress who had already experienced the highs and lows of show business. Born Vivian Roberta Jones in 1909 in Cherryvale, Kansas, she seemed an unlikely candidate for Hollywood stardom. Coming from a conservative Midwestern background, Vivian longed for the stage from a young age. Her family, however, wasn't supportive. In fact, her mother disapproved of acting, believing it to be an improper career for a woman. But Vivian's determination was relentless. Against all odds, she set out to pursue a dream that many believed was unattainable. Her early years were marked by struggle. She took classes, worked odd jobs, and slowly built her way into theater productions. Vivian eventually landed in New York City, where she joined the theater world and began carving out a reputation as a talented stage actress. She worked on Broadway in shows like Music in the Air and Hooray for What, honing her craft long before television was even on the horizon. This background gave Vivian the depth and experience that later set her apart from other comedic actresses. But when Hollywood came calling in the early 1950s, she had no idea her life would change forever. She was cast in I Love Lucy as Ethel Mertz, the quirky, long-suffering neighbor to Lucille Ball's Lucy Ricardo. On paper, it seemed like the perfect role for Vivian. Ethel was funny, reliable, and central to many of the show's plots. However, there was a catch. Unlike Lucy, who was portrayed as the glamorous housewife always scheming for the spotlight, Ethel was written as the frumpy sidekick, the one who grounded Lucy's chaos but rarely shined on her own. This dynamic wasn't just part of the script. It became part of Vivian's professional reality. Viewers adored the duo, but behind the laughter, Vivian privately struggled with being typecast. She had once dreamed of glamorous roles, yet now she was cemented in the minds of millions as the plain, matronly neighbor. And while the paycheck and fame were undeniable, the role came with personal sacrifices. Adding to the pressure was the casting of William Frawley as Fred Mertz, Ethel's on-screen husband. Frawley was more than 2 decades older than Vivian, and the age gap frustrated her. She felt it made her seem older than she really was. In reality, Vivian was in her early 40s when I Love Lucy began, still in her prime, but the role forced her into middle-aged domesticity. The audience didn't see the beautiful, witty actress she had once been on Broadway. They saw Ethel, the nagging wife of a cranky older man. Yet despite these frustrations, Vivian poured herself into the role. Her natural timing, sharp wit, and chemistry with Lucille Ball elevated I Love Lucy to legendary status. Critics praised her as one of the best second bananas in television history. But as Vivian would later reveal, being the beloved sidekick came with emotional costs she could never have imagined. On the surface, the set of I Love Lucy seemed like a dream. The laughter, the groundbreaking scripts, and the sheer magic of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's creation made the show a phenomenon unlike anything that had come before. Vivian Vance as Ethel Mertz was part of television history being written in real time. The good was undeniable: steady work, fame, and a place in the hearts of millions of Americans. Yet what audiences didn't know was that behind the laughter, there were challenges that weighed heavily on Vivian's spirit. The good moments were genuine. Vivian admired Lucille Ball's genius for physical comedy and Desi Arnaz's innovative approach to television production. The show pioneered techniques like the 3-camera setup and live audience tapings, which would become industry standards. Vivian relished being part of this revolution. She also loved that audiences genuinely adored her. Everywhere she went, people smiled, called her Ethel, and treated her like a member of their own family. For a small-town girl from Kansas, this was the stuff of dreams. But behind the smiles, the reality was much more complicated. Life on the set wasn't always easy for Vivian. The biggest source of tension came from her on-screen partner, William Frawley. Their comedic chemistry may have seemed effortless, but off-camera, their relationship was notoriously strained. Frawley was a heavy drinker with a sharp tongue, and he often made cutting remarks about Vivian's looks and weight. He reportedly called her that sack of potatoes behind her back, comments that cut deeply. Vivian despised being paired with him, not just because of his age, he was over 20 years older, but because of his gruff, sometimes cruel personality. The producers, however, thought their friction made for better comedy, and so Vivian was stuck in the role. Audiences laughed at the bickering between Fred and Ethel, never realizing that some of that tension wasn't acting, it was real. Vivian endured it, but it added to the personal cost of her success. Then there was her relationship with Lucille Ball. On screen, the two were inseparable friends, a comedic duo that remains iconic to this day. Off-screen, their relationship was more complicated. Lucille was the star, the face of the show, and she knew it. There were times when Lucille felt threatened by Vivian's natural comedic talent. Producers often noted that Vivian could steal a scene with just a look or a well-timed line, and while Lucy respected her co-star, she also made sure that the spotlight never drifted too far from herself. This created a dynamic where Vivian felt both indispensable and overlooked. She was praised for her contributions, but always second to Lucy. For a woman who had dreamed of being a leading actress, being perpetually cast in the shadows was frustrating. In later years, Vivian admitted that this imbalance weighed on her. The ugly truth of the set, however, went deeper. Hollywood in the 1950s was not kind to women, especially those who didn't fit the mold of the glamorous leading lady. Vivian's talents were undeniable, but the industry typecast her as the frumpy sidekick. She was told to gain weight, dress dowdily, and never outshine the star. For Vivian, who had once graced Broadway stages in elegant costumes, it was humiliating. As the seasons went on, Vivian grew increasingly disillusioned. The laughter and applause were real, but so were the sacrifices. She carried the weight of being loved by millions, yet feeling unappreciated by those who worked closest with her. Years later, when she reflected on this period, Vivian revealed just how much pain and resentment was hidden behind her smile, and her most shocking truths were yet to come. From the outside, Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance seemed inseparable. Their on-screen chemistry as Lucy and Ethel was so natural, so believable, that audiences assumed the two women must have been best friends off-screen as well. In reality, their relationship was far more complicated, marked by mutual respect, occasional affection, but also professional jealousy and personal tension. Vivian admired Lucille's incredible work ethic and her razor-sharp comedic instincts. Lucy was, without question, a genius at physical comedy and timing. But as the star of the show, Lucille controlled nearly every aspect of production. Nothing made it on screen without her approval. While this ensured the quality of I Love Lucy, it also meant that Vivian, as a supporting actress, had very little power. The tension between them first emerged when Vivian realized how much she was being asked to downplay her own looks and talent. Lucille, who was just 2 years older than Vivian, wanted her co-star to look older and less glamorous. Vivian was put into matronly dresses, given frumpy hairstyles, and told to gain weight so she wouldn't outshine Lucy. For Vivian, who had once been a striking stage actress, this was painful. She confided to friends that she felt stripped of her identity and boxed into a character that was nothing like her true self. At the same time, Vivian and Lucille occasionally butted heads over comedic timing. Vivian had a natural instinct for subtle comedy. One well-timed glance or perfectly delivered line could steal an entire scene. Lucy, however, didn't always appreciate being upstaged. According to some crew members, there were moments when Lucy deliberately adjusted scripts or staging to ensure she remained the center of attention. Though the two women rarely fought openly, the undercurrent of